Now, for some context and analysis, joining me on set is Emad Kiyaei, Director at the Middle East Treaty Organization. Emad, great to have you with us on the program today. Thank you so much for your time. I guess the big question is, can progress be made on the nuclear front on these upcoming talks? I mean, what kind of concrete proposals could come out, especially regarding Iran's nuclear and ballistic program?
Well, thank you first for bringing me on board. The third round of negotiations between US and Iran will happen tomorrow. And what's at stake here is primarily how to address Iran's nuclear file. If what President Trump in his address of the Union address, pointed out on Iran that Iran should not build a nuclear weapon, that its enrichment program must come under control, and that it should end its oppression of its people, then on the first 2 points, we already have technically viable and politically feasible solutions. And here, if the basis of the third round is on ensuring Iran does not build a nuclear weapon, how do we go about that verifiably? We have, as is being detailed in 183 pages, the JCPOA, or the Joint Comprehensive Plan on Action, Iran deal of 2015.
So what kind of compromise then can both sides agree to? I mean, Tehran has repeatedly sought sanctions relief, but is this something that you see Washington bending on?
I believe there is a way, simply because Iran is currently under the most comprehensive sanctions regime ever inflicted on a country. And the basis and basically the whole package is primarily by the United States. So there is areas such as nuclear-related US sanctions where the Trump administration can freeze it in return for Iran freezing its enrichment program. That's one very simple compromise that's already on the table. When it comes to the highly enriched uranium stockpile that Iran possesses that could be diverted towards weaponization, here again, the 400 kilograms of highly enriched uranium, Iran is prepared to dilute it and possibly even export it to another country. So on the stockpile, we have a solution. Finally, if we want to verify such that Iran does not build a nuclear weapon, the Iranians have already gone into conversation with the head of the International Atomic Energy Agency that will enforce the most intrusive inspections of Iran's nuclear program and its facilities, ensuring that we can account for every gram of fissile material entering Iran's nuclear program and making sure that it does not divert towards weaponization.
Now, we also have to consider, another stakeholder in all of this, which is Israel. If there were to be an interim deal, could or would Israel accept this?
It's my belief, following this issue, that the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu will continue to oppose any agreement between the United States and Iran. In his view, any agreement would set back the time on a possible military strike by the US on Iran. So in the terms of what the Israeli government wishes to see is regime change in Iran. And they see their golden opportunity now with the highest concentration of US military assets surrounding Iran, that this is the time for US to strike and take out the Iranian government.
And if there is a deal, how do we make sure that Tehran sticks to what was agreed?
It's very simple. Iran did stick to the deal that was originally signed between the world powers and Iran back in 2015. It was the Trump administration term 1 that pulled out of that multilateral agreement. Until then, Iran committed and delivered on what they had promised and agreed to in that agreement. Therefore, we know that they have the capability to do so. And to add to this, President Trump keeps bragging about the fact that last June, the American strike on Iran following Israel's attack on Iran resulted in the Iranian nuclear program being irreversible, set back by targeting 3 Iranian nuclear facilities. Therefore, Iran is actually at a weaker point, even in its nuclear domain. So they would, and it's easier right now, to be able to monitor, inspect, and verify Iran is not building a nuclear weapon.
Continuing on what you just said, Emad, let's talk about the status of Iran's nuclear program, because Trump claimed back in June that it had already been obliterated, but dismantling whatever remains of it appears to be back on Washington's agenda.
Yes, I mean, the nuclear file seems to be lingering on, primarily because you cannot bomb out the knowledge of a nation on a specific industry or technology. However, we are able to ensure Iran's nuclear program remains peaceful. And mind you, the only nuclear weapon state, even though they do not openly say it, is Israel. So here in the Middle East, there's only one nuclear weapon state, Israel, and there's Iran with an advanced nuclear program that can be curtailed, limited, and ensured that it's peaceful. We can reach a deal on this, but as you mentioned, it should be within the framework of an interim deal, whereby then we can expand into other areas of importance. May that be energy security, the support for proxies across the region, may that be the ballistic missile issue that is now on the surface. On all of these, we will be able to address within a comprehensive negotiations between US and Iran, whereby regional countries and global powers within UN Security Council will be invited to participate so that we realize that a US-Iran issues at hand are not limited to these two countries. Iran's ballistic missile program, Iran's nuclear program, Iran's humanitarian conditions that are facing after the massacre of the Iranian government of the protesters, and a horde of other issues cannot be resolved without the involvement of regional countries around the table.
So really, a lot's at stake, obviously, because the talks could effectively determine Washington's next steps. Could these talks postpone or prevent Washington's strikes?
This is our wish, and I'm saying this as a human being, not just as an Iranian. In a war, nobody wins. I was raised in war between Iraq and Iran. I've seen the million people who died on both sides. For what? And this time, a war between US and Iran is not limited to Iran. Yes, Iran will hurt, Iran will bleed, possibly the regime will fall. All of these things are possible. But with it, the Iranian government and its military will be able to inflict, along with its proxies and other assets, enormous harm to US military personnel, bases, and by extension, unfortunately, burn the whole region with it, including attacks directly on Israel.
So you're talking about repercussions for the wider region. We are going to get to that. But first, Donald Trump hasn't really made clear his aims of the possible military action. Is he trying to, strengthen his position ahead of the negotiations?
Definitely. I mean, when you come to a negotiating table and you've got a gun on the head of the leadership in Iran, it's quite convincing and could result in major concessions by the Iranians. However, this is important, and this is again understanding the other side, is that within the Iranian leadership, for 47 years, one of the mantras of their revolution that ousted the Shah in 79, and the key ally of the US in the region, is that they are opposed to imperialists, colonials, and the US as the hegemon that is seeking to control other countries. Based on that ideology, we may not believe it, but they do. They will fight to the last drop of blood to be able to fend off this latest military threat on Iran.
Now, speaking of leadership, what is the likelihood that a possible regime change, is on the cards for Donald Trump?
I am sure that within the thinking and analysis and scenarios, the administration in Washington seeks a change in Iran's leadership. If that comes through internal upheaval and change by the people of Iran or by external threats and use of force, I'm pretty certain that it's part of the package and part of the reasoning why they are now bringing so many of their military assets around Iran.
Now, Iran is not in a strong position. It's internally weakened due to, obviously, the bloody protests against the leadership and the economy. Is this likely to play into the negotiations in any way?
Indeed. Iran is weakened. Its proxies, Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, and others have been severely damaged and weakened by Israel's attacks on those groups, in addition to the United States. So Iran is weak regionally from its allies, and internally, as you have highlighted, We saw the largest uprising following the Women, Life, Freedom movement of 2022, that Iranian public is now reached a level that cannot accept this current government from continuing. There's one way that we can change this that will not involve massive violence, and that's through a transformation and change in Iran by the Iranians, and the opposition to this government is within the jails and rotting in those cells of Iran, and this is where the opposition to the Iranian government is. It's not sitting in Washington, it's not sitting in London or Tel Aviv. It's in Iran by the Iranian people. They've done it before, they can do it again.
Indeed, but this is, I just wanted to ask you, is this a likely scenario in your opinion? I mean, you yourself have family in Iran, and you told me just earlier before the interview that you couldn't reach your family for 12 days. I mean, I'm sure you have, experienced deep personal woes regarding these protests, but do you see that moving forward in any way?
Indeed. The protests haven't ended. The opposition to this current government hasn't ended. We know that there are ways forward if we give the Iranian public and people the means and the space to be able to then manifest what they wish. But a war with Iran by the United States will set back this movement, because repression of the United States on Iranian government will inevitably then unleash repression by the state even more on the public.
Emad, we're going to leave it there, unfortunately, but very great to have you on set with us. Thank you so much for your time today.